This is the plaintiff, Annabella Basil. She says she hired the defendant to do some construction work at her office. He subbed the work out to his friend, and it was a hack job. The defendant claims the responsibility of the work falls on the worker who did the work, but she disagrees. The defendant's the one she made the checks out to. He turned out to be a foul-mouthed jerk who told her to go blank herself. She's gonna sue him here and now for the $2,450 she's owed. This is the defendant, Mac Hernandez. He says he's just an electrician, and the plaintiff needed a carpenter. The plaintiff had a verbal contract with the carpenter, not him, and he has no idea why she's turning around and suing him, because when he does a job, he gets everything in writing, legally and legit. He's accused of getting a customer mad, really, really mad.
All parties, please raise your right hand.
Welcome back to the People's Court. Next case on the docket, the plaintiff hired the defendant to do a construction job, and the job turned out to be a disaster. The defendant says all he did was find a contractor for her, so she should take it up with him. It's the case of If I Were a Carpenter.
Your Honor.
Thank you, Douglas.
You're welcome, ma'am.
Annabella Basil?
Yes.
You are suing Magdiel Mac Hernandez
Yes.
for $2,450 for poor workmanship that you say he did to your, is it your home?
My office space.
Your offices, when he put in a flooring and did some work on to cover up an AC hole. Tell me what happened here.
I originally hired Mac to do some electrical work, and he came in. He was referred by somebody. He did a great job. So he was indicating that he did some mechanical work in the back, as far as replacing walls and doing the subfloor, doing all that.
That's not mechanical work. That's
I'm sorry. I apologize.
Doing flooring and doing what else?
He was going to redo my floor because it was crooked. He was going to put up new walls. He was going to fix the bathroom. No, he was going to get paneling and put it up against the walls because the walls looked old.
Okay.
And I hired him. He said he had a great friend of his who knew how to do the work. So they came in, they gave me a quote. They started a couple days later. And ever since then, everything was being hacked. They asked me for money for supplies. I gave them the money for supplies. They never proved what they bought. But the things that they did to the building was just awful.
What, like what?
They had the subfloor, the floor that they were supposed to put level acid down to make the floor straight.
They were supposed to what?
Level acid.
What's that?
It makes the floor straight. It's like a cement. They didn't do it, so the floor has a huge dip in it.
Had you two discussed that beforehand, or you just expect them to know that because that's their business?
No, we discussed it, and he actually told me how much it would cost to get it. So I did give him a check to cover that supplies. But he never did it. So he put subfloor on top of the bad floor, so the whole thing has a 3-inch drop.
Let me see the pictures. You actually have a picture with
I do. I have all the pictures.
Did they have to rip out a floor that was there beforehand?
No.
What was there?
It was just a crooked floor. It's an old building.
What made of what?
Made of wood. There was nothing else.
So they were. What you hired them to do was put subflooring on top of that?
I hired them to put the level acid on one end. So once you put the subfloor on top, it should be all straight. And to do the bathroom over again, including the subfloor. But they ended up botching that too. They think that's straight.
Okay, so go on.
And the work that they did was very sloppy. They never did the ends. The tiles they glued down. They glued only the middle, but not the sides. So when I went to vacuum up the back room, the tile would just lift.
No, on the vacuum?
Yes. On the vacuum, yes.
Oh my gosh, you don't have a picture of that for me?
I do, it's in there.
You have a picture of you lifting it with the vacuum?
Oh no, I've got a picture of the tiles, and you can actually see where it's glued and where it's not glued.
Show me the pictures that you're referring to that show where it's glued and where it's not glued. And I see you supplied some checks. You supplied a lot more checks than what you're suing for, so I guess some of that is for the electrical work?
Yes, and that I'm not suing for. He did do a decent job.
Okay, and so there's a $700 check?
Correct.
A $400 check?
Correct.
That's for labor?
That's for
labor. And then
labor.
according to you, you don't write anything on memo lines.
No.
So, but according to you, the $350 was for materials?
For materials.
Is there a written contract between you folks?
No, it wasn't written.
How come?
Because he did a good job the first time he was there.
Was there a written estimate on that one?
No, there was not.
Oh, so I guess at some point you've been taking your chances, haven't you?
I took my chance with him.
So what did she want me to look at there? The difference
You
in
could
color?
see the difference in color, that the middle is glued, but the sides were never glued.
Now, you first start realizing you're unhappy with the job when?
The second day they were there, I told him he has to take the subfloor right back out. And he says, well, they're going to fix that.
So when did they fix it?
They did not come back and fix it.
Did you ask them to come back and fix it?
I spoke to them. They said that they were going to fix it.
Right. And then what happened instead of them coming back and fixing it?
After I had called them, started to complain about the floor.
Yeah, but that implies time had passed. So I'm wondering how come they weren't fixing it that day or the next day.
Because they said that the floor had to dry.
Ah, that's the part that was missing. So they told you, oh, it has to settle.
It has to settle?
It has to settle.
The heat from the room.
Right, it has to settle long enough for me to skip town. All right.
Correct.
The plaintiff says the defendant is on the hook for the horrible contractor he put on the job. Her crib was a disaster. Let's listen.
He said that heat from the room is going to make the tile settle, and then in a couple days we're going to finish up the work.
All right. So, and then did they come back in a couple of days? All right. So you call the person who you'd always dealt with, who was Matt.
I called Mac, he wasn't available, so I call his friend John and say, listen, John, all the floors are coming up. They're not settling that you said. He says, well, I've already been paid, and he told me that off.
Oh.
Yeah. So then I call Mac. I'm a Mac. This is what's going on. You promised this was all guaranteed. And then he says, I'm sorry. It's all his fault. You have to get money from him.
Oh, now, just about now, something in writing would be awesome, right?
Yeah.
All right. Now, but the 700 and the 400 and the 350 also covered not just the flooring, but something else, something having to do with the hole with the AC? What's wrong with
Because
that?
what they did was, instead of insulating the hole, because you can't tell the hole from exterior, instead of insulating the hole and putting up some kind of like a paneling or a heavy duty wood, what they did is they took a 1/16 of an inch paneling wall, just put it up against the hole. So all the air from outside was coming through the unit into our office.
Through the unit or through the hole?
Through the hole.
Okay, but in the pictures that you're showing me, it's very obvious that's going to happen because the hole is still there. I mean, there's a right way and a cheap way. The right way is to have all that disconnected, have the brickwork done. You weren't paying for the cheap way. What you paid them for was to put up a paneling? What did you expect them to do differently?
I paid for the insulation, I paid for the wood, and I paid it to be covered. What they did is they never bought the insulation. They put the paneling up.
Can you keep saying everything that's included in the as though somebody handed you an itemized list of things that included level acid, that included insulation. Can I see that list that you were relying on?
Sure.
Because this is the picture of the outside of that item, correct? That it's like some metal thing.
That's why we couldn't tell that there was nothing.
Why not? Why don't you stick your little head up there and see? You can tell. You could tell. If you just stick your little head up, you'll see what's there.
Never thought to even question it. The only time we noticed it is when the wind blew it, the whole unit fell down.
Yeah,
and there
everything's
was
fine
nothing.
until it's not fine. If you put a Band-Aid on a hemorrhaging, gaping wound that requires stitches, you're gonna notice it once the hemorrhaging begins again. That's how it's gonna work. Talk to me, what's going on?
All right. First of all, Your Honor, I went in as a helper on the job.
You're the guy getting all the checks. They're all written to you.
That's correct, because...
Well, how are you the helper on the job when the checks are all written to you?
I was only the electrician. My part of the job was to do the electrical work, and then his part of the job, Johnny, which she did a verbal agreement with him, he was go ahead to install the flooring and repair the walls.
Okay. There are cases where that is true. There are cases where that's not true. You're not looking really good on this position when every check was written to you and not Johnny.
I know that.
All right, so go on.
So regarding the checks, she wrote them to me because my coworker, Johnny, did not have an ID with him. All right, so the checks were made out to me. All right?
Either that or you're the guy she was dealing with. But go on.
I was just hired to do electrical work.
Was this job done appropriately or not appropriately?
The actual job where we first started off, leveling the floor, all right, as we're demoing the ductwork that she talked about, right, the air conditioning, as that stuff is being removed and some of the walls are being taken down, I'm throwing stuff out.
Okay, hold on, slow down, because I want to know the scope of the work since I can't look at a contract. The 700, 400, and 350. All the work that you guys did there besides the electrical that you did, which is not in question. What was the work? Rip out the ducts, cover the wall, do the floor. That's what I'm asking.
Flooring and put some panelings up and remove ductwork.
Remove the ductwork?
Remove ductwork and put some walls up, paneling.
Just the paneling or walls? There's a difference between paneling and walls.
Just the paneling.
Didn't everybody realize that there would obviously be a problem with just putting up paneling with this hole that's exposed to the elements like that. Didn't anybody realize this would be a problem?
I understand that.
Did
I
anybody
understand
ever tell her that?
But that's something that they might have discussed, not me. I'm there as a helper, okay? That's what I'm trying to get at here.
I know, but you're
I'm just a helper on the
such
job.
a rocky road for you.
I understand that. I'm an electrician,
Every check
not a-
is written to you.
I know
It's
that.
so hard for you to
She should be
pretend
ta-
that you're not in charge when every check is written for you.
She should be taking him to court, not me.
So is this contractor responsible for a poor job that the subcontractor does?
Definitely. The contractor is responsible because he hired the subcontractor, not the person.
Fair enough. What do you think?
Absolutely. There's no question about it. The contractor.
Contractor's responsible?
Contractor's definitely responsible.
Okay, he's trying to get off the hook. Don't think he will. Going inside the courtroom.
Let me give you a piece of advice, Mr. Hernandez, for any other contract that you go into from here on and in the future. No judge with connected brain cells is going to allow you to come into court and say, oh, it's someone else's problem because she was dealing with someone else when every check is written to you.
I understand that.
I know, but don't interrupt me. You can't divorce yourself from financial responsibility for the job and call yourself a helper boy when every check, the entire $1,400 and something is written not to your boss, but to you.
But that
and
was...
that's Mr. Hernandez, I'm not going to continue to debate this with you. Every stinking check is in your name.
I understand.
Don't insult my intelligence.
I'm
Just
not
stop.
trying to.
So now the next question becomes, because now that we know I'm not going to let you out of financial responsibility by saying you're not the boss, you're just the helper and all that. Now that we know that's not going to happen, the question is, how much are you entitled to back? We have a total of $1,450 that went that way. You're complaining about the floor, and I'm with you. This is a problem. This is going to have to be redone. This was very poorly done. He can't defend the job because he keeps saying he was out putting out garbage at the time.
Correct.
All right. I see from looking at it that it's not, things are not okay. Sometimes though, lo barato sale caro. The cheap comes out expensive. And clearly are you with her? Like you guys are business partners? You guys were trying to do this on the cheap. So some of that is still going to end up being your problem. If you decide to do something a cheap way, and then it turns out to have been a bad idea, like say, for example, sticking a piece of paneling against a place where an AC was, how can you possibly blame that on them when that's all you paid them to do? And if you paid them to do insulation and all this other stuff, I'm going to sort of need you to prove to me that you paid them to do insulation, because you know what's missing? A contract where it says insulation, a contract where it says framing out the wall, a contract where it says drywall work. In fact, from the piece of paper you gave me, the word insulation isn't anywhere there. So what, you handed that to me when I asked you to prove to me?
That was my notes when I originally was talking to him.
Oh,
and
that's how you can. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, even
He
your notes don't talk about insulation.
He gave me a verbal as to what he was going to buy.
Sweetheart, at some point, you need to get your act together and make sure that you're able to come into a court of law and prove that you paid for the big job as opposed to the slap it on and let's see how it goes job. Okay? In your lawsuit, you are suing for $2,450, which means you're not just suing for the $1,450 that you paid them back. You also want $1,000 to rip up that vinyl tile that apparently half of which is already ripped up by you guys with a vacuum. So why would I ever order them to pay you $1,000 to rip up the existing
Because
tile?
all the supplies that I purchased, they've destroyed them, so
No,
now I have to
that
buy.
is included in the materials part of your lawsuit. I am going to award you that.
Okay.
But you want to turn a $1,450 lawsuit into a $2,450 lawsuit. I'm trying to understand how. And the only other item in your lawsuit is $1,000 to rip up these vinyl things that are coming off. That
No, they have to take-
You can't have it both ways.
No.
They can't not be glued down and be, like so easy to pop up. And then they also cost $1,000 to rip up. No. What I'm going to order is a portion of the $1,450 that's in play returned to you. I'm going to order $1,200 returned to you of the money that you paid to them. Okay? And your court costs, of course. That is my verdict. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Well, he wasn't the boss, he said, but he got all the checks made out to him. What's your reaction to the outcome of this case? You stand right next to him.
I'm a little upset at the verdict.
Yeah, why? What upsets you about it?
Well, because I was only hired to be a helper on the job, not to do the actual carpentry work.
Well, if you're just a helper, why do you get the checks made out to you?
Well, because the guy didn't have any IDs on him that day. That's why.
That makes you the boss.
So I understand that. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
What about getting everything in writing about a job you're going to want to take?
The next time I do that, then that's what will happen.
Yeah, lesson number 1 at the
Yes.
People's Court,
Oh,
right
of
around the
course.
corner,
Thank
okay?
you.
And it's the same thing with the plaintiff. Getting everything in writing is the way to go. Haven't you ever watched the People's Court before? Don't you know that by now?
I did.
All right, so what do you think you did wrong in this case? What could have avoided all this?
Obviously getting it in writing, but I did trust him. He did do a good job the first time, but unfortunately,
Well, you hired
he's not a
him,
mechanic.
you hired him to do like a Fugazi job, and you paid for a Fugazi job. You got it.
I think it was less than a adequate job. It was like a 2-year-old putting
Well,
it
you
together.
wanted it done cheap. Next
was
time
less than cheap, yeah.
you got what you paid for.
I did.
Harvey?
The moral here is it doesn't matter what somebody calls himself. He could say he's just a helper. But if he looks like the boss and acts like the boss and does everything like the boss, he's the boss. That will do it for this case. Litigants for the next case on the way into the courtroom right now.